I'm Benny Ming, curator of the Wing Chun Museum in Dayton, Ohio. This would be the Series 9. The topic is on the Lok Din Bun Guan in the Yip Man system. What you have just saw is the sequence of the Lok Din Bun Guan. Now, I use the word sequence because that is exactly what it is. Most of the family I train with in the Yip Man system, every one of them has slight variation in their Lok Din Bun Guan. So the key here is not see which sequence is correct, because the sequence could be different and technique could be slightly different. So the key in order to understand the Lok Din Bun Guan is the topic of this tape. In this series, I'm going to break the Lok Din Bun Guan into few progressions based on understanding and progression of training. First, I will talk about the basic history of the pole, then Gei Bun Gong basic exercise, third, the fundamental movements of the pole, and as you already seen, the sequence. And then last is most important, is the concept. Basic exercise. This is fundamentals, because the basic exercise primarily develop the proper attributes that take us in being able to develop the proper mechanics. We're going to break it down into empty hand, single hand exercise, and then double hand exercise. First exercise I want to demonstrate is empty hand. Traditionally we call it Kun Zong. Okay. Now up to now you have seen Siren Tao Chang Biu, Biu Ji Mo Ren Zong. Okay, all of them consist of stances that fit into the 6-gate theories. Okay, but traditionally the pole is coming directly from the Shaolin. So we're going to be introducing what we call Sei Ping Hai Ma, a big pole stance. Because in order to hold a longer weapon, heavier weapon, the stance is always the base. So this exercise to develop the proper structure, okay, we call it Kun Zong. Again, Kun Zong developed the basic fitness, mechanics, and introduced the wide hold stances. But next we have a series of basic exercise, is we call Dan Sao Ling Guan. Remember, this is step-by-step progression training of the 6.5 point pole. So for newcomers or beginners, primarily it's for strengthening exercise. So I do not suggest that you use a heavy pole for the single hand, because if you put too much stress with the release of energy, you might not be able to develop your structure. You might even actually strain your body. So this is a one-hand exercise. You notice, okay, it's approximately inside a fist width. Single hand Dan Guan. Notice the palm is up, palms down. You want to be able to maintain the tip at the same level. The wrists are locked. Elbow is not totally locked. Release the energy, maintain the same level. Next one, same thing, but we go to the side. And then the third one, we go straight. Yat, Yi, Sa. Yat. You can do 6 of each, 10 of each, or you can do it together like a set. Sa. Down, side, front. The sequence is the method. Okay, it's important that you start strengthening your mechanics to support the long weapons. The next one, tilt, down. Again, this is wrist. proper mechanics, how the joint, my elbow, supported by the wrist, because the elbow is in place. Next one is the same thing, but behind. So we're going to do the back tilt. I'm going to use my left hand. And then last, the importance is maintaining as straight as possible your wrist and produce the energy. To teach you how to fucking be able to expel the energy, be able to produce the energy or project the energy. So those are 6 basic exercises for single hands. Double hand. As I mentioned before, when you do single hand, it's good to just get a regular pull so your body can get used to it. But eventually, the idea is to strengthen up your body so you can handle more heavy weapon. Typical Lukdinpun Guan could be anywhere from 3 pounds up to 6 pounds. In this case, this is approximately 4 pounds. Lukdinpun Guan is considered or called Dantao Guan. That means that we use one end. Ability to really generate the force in one end. The first one, called double hand, is Dan Guan. It's like similar to single hand. And you add the body mechanics of the zone. Now, if you just use the hand, that's same as one hand. But this one is 2 hand, you gotta be able to use and express the body. The next one, Biu Guan. You notice the motion is out, in, out, in. We complement each other by practicing empty hand and the weapons. The mechanics are consistent. So for example, if your elbow goes out, there's no way you can do that. There's no way you can do that. So that's why our vertical punch never is like this. Most of our techniques are elbow in. Again, why? Because mechanics. This is much stronger. This is much stronger. This is weak. That's why when we use a technique, this is not a good tansa, mechanics is not good. This is a better punch. This is a weaker punch. Because we're talking about straight, not a hook punch. Proper measurements. Your hands is never more than 1 fist. You always have slightly more. So you don't grab all the way to the end. Okay, but inside a fist width. And then how far does this hand go? Everyone's different. You could have a short guy and tall guy. So you use your own limb to measure. Put it under your armpit. This is the basic grip. Lukdinpun Guan. Lukdinpun Guan. Okay, now we're going to go back into understanding basic movements, such as the basic stances, footwork, and the individual techniques. There are a few simple stances. This is neutral. Okay, most of the time when we start out the pole form, of course, this will be the Ichikimuruma from the previous forms, but you won't see this in the Lukdinpun Guan form. So really the next one is the horse stance. Okay, this is classical Shaolin stances. Sometimes you see people punching like this. This is called 四平大馬. Okay, the next one you have the front stances, which allow you to project energy forward. The next one you have the 吊大馬. Okay, look like a back stance, or some people call it a cat stance. So primarily you have those 4 stances. Number 1, neutral. 四平大馬, horse stance. This project energy to the side, very strong to the side. The next one, front stance. This project energy forward. The next one, allow you to be able to pivot. Okay, back stance or 吊大馬. So you have those stances. Easy way to remember is you go through the sequence. Now if you look at the set, the mobility consists of footwork that primarily is not different from fencing, because we're dealing with occupied space and maximizing the distance. So because we have the distance carrying long weapons, not too many times we need to actually step forward. So the footwork primarily is done in a free fighting format. Okay, you see this is called step slide. So in actuality, in Lok-Din-Pun Guan, the footwork also consists of step slide. Okay, so you have step slide, you have turning. Okay, so we call this the half step footwork, rather than you taking a full step forward. Okay, so the stances and footwork, some of the very fundamentals in the Shaolin stances, because in old days, really, the weapons and empty hand are learned and taught simultaneously. In the basic hand form, we have Yichi Kamyama, where Lok-Din-Pun Guan is more natural. We call this neutral stance. Okay, the knees are not straight. Okay, the hip are still tilt forward. It's supported. The body is supporting. It's called neutral stance. Now, footwork and moving forward, you actually have seen it already. Moving forward, moving backwards. This is advancing and retreating. Moving up or moving back. Okay, as well as angling, left and right. And last, we have what we call 吊大馬. So again, forward, backwards, angles, up and back. In the pole form, we have Sat Guan. It's a downward motion on the pole. We have Lan Guan. Okay, Lan Guan. And we have Biu Guan. Biu Guan. Then from here, with 吊大馬, Dang, Tilt, Tilt. We have Tom, Fook, Bong, So Guan. So those are the main techniques. So you have seen the basic stances, the movement, the footwork, as well as the individual techniques. But the problem with the form sequence is every family is different. So then the beginner student or student that's learning this form always asks, so which version is correct? Again, as I introduced the concept of the form, the key is in the Lok-Din-Pun Guan concept. It's not in the sequence or how many techniques that you have. But nonetheless, you need to know what's involved with the stances, footwork, as well as the individual techniques. All the basic techniques, 杀关，杀关，杀关，拦关，拦关，拦关，拦关，拦关。Biu, biu. This is upper body Kungfu. Then you add the whole body. Sat guan, sat guan, sat, biu, lan. So you see now you can add the body, the footwork. So there are no fixed patterns. It's based on sequence of training. So individually, tan, come, or foot, biu. So you can repeat those combination techniques in any sequence to really sharpen up your forms and understand the sequence. Later, you must know the applications. Next, I'm going to talk about the concept. One time ago, there's a Wing Chun movie just came out. They talk about Lok Din Bu Guan. And this movie shows the master doing the pole. And when he hits the wall, it makes 6 holes, round holes. One of the technique, it hits the wall, makes half of the hole. So therefore the pole is called 6.5 point pole. But that is the movie version, what is Lok Din Bu Guan. So there are always some explanations. The name is the concept. It's not about techniques. Hopefully in this chart, we can see why we call Lok Din Bu Guan. Let's start with the techniques of Guan. Look at the biu. The area of the weapons is basically right here. So we call that din. Anytime you have ability to use or circumstances where you use the tip of the pole, the concept is called din. So in other words, if I biu, thrust, bang, tilt, all those 3 techniques could be using the concept of din. That's the first point. Lok din, that's the first point. So 6.5 point, this is the first point. So let's continue. Dang tilt. You also use the middle part of the pole. Tilt, you could be hitting the guy's arm as he's carrying the weapons. So not necessarily the tip. So you could have different technique, but also express different concepts. Let's go into the next point. We call sat. It's basically a downward motion. Okay? It's a downward motion. How you destroy your opponent's weapon as well as your opponent's applying a downward motion. That, again, is using the middle part of the pole. Okay, now next series, right, is the up, tilt. When you see the forms, you have up, down, but this is the standard of dang tilt. Sometimes your up motion could be both hands up or both hands down. Okay, this expresses the concept of down and up, the point. So if you go to point number 4 is keep. That means the opponent's center line, or as the center line strike is coming in, you parry it. So we call it keep. The part of the weapon is the front half of the body. So you have tan, okay? You have bong, okay? So guan. All this is, if you use those techniques as a way to redirect, to open up, to redirect, then you're expressing the key concept. A lot of people are confused with the technique's name. They think the 6.5 point is somewhere around here. It's not in the technique, it's in the concepts. For example, foot guan could be cover, which is part of the concept of lan. Okay? Or it could be a running, which is zao. Okay? So if somebody hits my pole, I run. So look like you're doing the foot guan, but actually that's also the concept is when you apply it, what is the theory behind it is actually zao guan. So you got your hin guan and zao guan. running pole and circle pole. And then 6 is a point, a concept you use almost the full length of the pole. Okay, if somehow the opponent's got in, I can obstruct, brace myself using the second half of the pole. Or I can obstruct using the first half of the pole. So in other words, the point number 6 utilizes the whole length of the pole. So the concept expresses the applications. What is the intent? There could be much more techniques to express those concepts and intent. So that's why when we practice a form, you cannot say, well, if you have this technique, then it's the right form. If you don't have this technique, it's the wrong form. Each family has a different set of techniques. But the universally, what we call 6.5 is based on the concept. So total, actually, there's 7 concepts. The last one is half. The half point is called flow or called lao. Now imagine you learn so many techniques, right? But you cannot connect them. You're not going to be able to apply your technique. Now, if you can connect them, but you cannot flow, that means you get stuck. For example, when you practice the form, the fixed pattern, you get stuck because it's fixed. So when you practice the form, it's fundamentals. Later on, you got to train it with live energy or live opponents. So therefore, in order to connect all the points, you must have the 7th point. That is the half point. Now, why do we call half a point? Imagine this 6th point is 50% of the game. And then the connection is the rest of the 50%. So therefore, it's called 6.5. Because without this last concept, lao or flow, you don't have a half point, or that means half of it is missing. So that's why we call it 6.5 concept. And concepts are expressed through the numbers of techniques, from build all the way to line. Okay, you notice flow is not a technique. It's the ability to connect all those techniques and be able to express it where it's not fixed. So in this chart, you can understand, okay, what is technique? And then really, what area are you using in one sort of pole? And then last, what is the name of 6.5? Okay? Wing Chun is a complete system. We start from an empty hand. Right from the beginning, there is a concept in the empty hand, which I explained in my sitting top series. One of the core concepts called center line. Okay? Now, if you imagine you carry a long weapon and you overshoot your defense, or you just thrust forward and doesn't have a center line reference, for long weapon combat, you're not going to be effective. As a matter of fact, it opens up your defense, okay? And there are no second chances when you carry a long weapon like that. That's why in Wing Chun we have the saying, guan mo liang hang. There are no two sounds. One move, most of the time, it determines the outcomes already. So besides the meaning of 6.5, most of the core concept is actually from weapons, center line. Okay, this is one example. And second, if you remember all the basic exercise we've done is to strengthen our mechanics, our structures. Again, through carrying a long weapon and heavy weapon, you find out what is a good structure, what is a weak structure. Okay, and then fully develop your body where not only you have a high stance within the 6 gate, now you have a traditional stances, which again points back to the roots of Shaolin. Okay, now I'm going to go through the Lok Din Bun Guan form step by step. This is called Sat Guan. Okay, Sat is downward expression of the pole. It's a concept. So that means you could be using the tip or the body or even this part based on the ranges. Okay, so it's a concept. Build, dang till. Okay, so build, dang till, it could be as a technique. Okay, but it belongs to the concept of dim, first concept. Now, if I go dang and till using the body, then it becomes the concept of tai and sa. So again, try to understand the difference between technique and concept. So we go through 3 sequences. Build, then, tilt, then it's 圈棍, 走棍, or 腹棍. Okay? Hyun and the moving is where you parry and move the pole to get the right angle. So this is a concept we call 走棍. So those are the techniques. So you go through 3 sequences. On the way back, lock ma, moving back, then tilt, then tilt, then tilt. So with the tilt time on. From there, we go off to the angle, tan. This is tan, which is part of the concept keep, to open or to redirect. Then, same sequence, fook, build, okay? Tan, so guan. So that's why each sequence, or actually each teacher might have variation. My teacher in Ye system is Grandmaster Mo Yat. And also I have a fortunate training experience with Grandmaster Yi Jing. Grandmaster Yi Jing does not do the tan, where Grandmaster Mo Yat does the tan. Again, this type of small difference is on sequence, but they cover all the concepts. So, tan, so, fook, build, then, tilt. Then, tilt. Again, hyun, fook, build, then, tilt. Same sequence. Coming back, then it's bong guan, fook guan with the front stance, build, come back, bong guan, lan guan, then sat guan. So the step by step, you can start to see the technique, but it's important. Technique is not the same as the concept. But throughout the whole form, you express this all 6 points. The connection, the flow is the half point. Let's break down the sequence again. 4 sequence. Sat, build, then, tilt, 走棍, 圈棍, fook, then repeat. Now this is the first sequence going forward. Second sequence going back. Okay, hao ma or lock ma, then biu guan, then tilt. Lock ma biu guan, then tilt. Lock ma biu guan, then tilt. So 3 step up and 3 step back. So the third sequence, moving to my right, tan, so fook, biu, then tilt. So you notice, off to the corner, but by the time I come back to dang tilt, I'm back to center line straight again. So the third sequence. Now, the fourth sequence moving to my left. So 2 sequences, 2 steps here. Then back, then tilt. Bong guan, lan guan, sat guan. So completely you have up sequence, down, moving back, right, left, finishing move.
Does the sequence of training matter for the pole practice?
This is a very good question. In the modern day Wing Chun, such as the Yip-Man system, most of the weapons are practiced last, such as the pole and the knife. You go through Silim Tao, Tongpei Biuji, and Muk and Zong before you get to the weapons. There are many reasons for that. Number one could be the teacher's methodology, such as the Yip-Man, due to his geographical locations and many reasons. Maybe he taught the weapons last. That this is a methodology. So it's not really a right or wrong things. Number two, in the past, this system comes from Shaolin or any type of old fighting system that is dealing with reality of fighting, that you have to really pick up the weapons right from the beginning. Just like today, we join the military. We don't learn hand-to-hand combat first. We learn how to shoot first. So most of the practical system of the past, you learn weapons and hand-to-hand combat simultaneously. So the way that I teach my students is that we teach the weapons fundamentals, as you've seen through the tape, basic exercise, basic movements, simultaneously with the hand-to-hand combat. So again, if you want to base on more of a natural progression based on history, is you can do the weapons and hand-to-hand combat at the same time. Or you follow a certain family lineage. If your teacher taught you a certain way, you can carry on that traditions. So in my mind, the sequence is not so important, as long as you get the complete pictures.
So then where does the history of the pole originate from?
Now this is more of dealing with the history. Number one, history is not 100% because we don't have a time machine. Most of the history is based on legends or writing that are really not historical writings. So there are primarily two sources of information that explain about the pole. If we go back to the old days where Wing Chun comes from Shaolin, and Shaolin Temple is known for its pole techniques, but particularly in the Qing Dynasty and Ming Dynasty period, there were a period of time where the southern Shaolin Temple were combined force with the military people in the south to fight off the Japanese pirates. Now there was well documented where the generals, the military people have introduced many long weapons to the Shaolin monks, such as a spear. So there are certain Wing Chun lineage today that is based on the Shaolin spear and then change and adapt into pole techniques. So it contain the elements of spear and pole. So as progressively we move into modern day, such as the opera days, this is in the middle of 1800s, then you see the elements of today's Lok Din Pui Guan start taking into shape. Number one, the weapon gotten heavier, okay, and then the sequence, what you see today is like Yip-Man's form, Lok Din Pui Guan start taking in shape. I believe that has to do with, again, geographical locations, such as the Red Bow. Again, based on legends, Leung Yidai was very proficient with his pole. And being in a Red Opera on the boat, they use long poles to steer as well as to push the boat in shallow waters. So that might be one of the reasons where the pole gotten heavier. So the structure and technique have also changed. So primarily there are those two identity of the Shaolin Wing Chun pole. One is still contain the old Shaolin identity of the pole form. The second is modern day Lok Din Pui Guan, where it becomes the heavy weapon what we see today. But the origins still go back to the Shaolin.
Why are there so many variations in the pole forms?
Now, hopefully this table will give you the answer already. As I mentioned, if you go after each family and you look at their sequence, you will see variations, and the variations due to these techniques. Okay, for example, Grandmaster Yip Jing, he does not have the tan, where Grandmaster Moyet have the tan. So if you follow a certain sequence, almost every family I come across, I have seen to 17, Yip Jing, Yip Zhen, Makbo, Moyet, and many other sifus in Wing Chun's pole form. And they are all different. But the difference, again, is in the techniques. The key is that we don't want to look at the variation of technique. Is that we have to look, does the form contain the original 6.5 point concept? So again, the key question is that as long as the concept is there, you can have many variations. As a matter of fact, some of the most important concepts of Wing Chun created because of the long weapon. For example, if you think about the center line, if I carry a long weapon, and if you don't have your center line, okay, fighting a long weapon, that means you really don't have a reference to be efficient. Okay, if you're just going all over the places and somebody comes in with a long weapon, you're not going to be able to stop that. And number two is really the gate theories. Okay, so as we talk about the Wing Chun form, you have the 6 gates, but in this form here, Lok Din Bun Guan, you see the body are all turned sideways. So the gate theory is still there. It's just that when I'm holding a long weapon, I turn sideways. So now you have the upper, middle, and the lower gates. So you have the 3 gates facing rather than the 6 gate facing. So the gate theory and center line is one of the key concepts of the pole, which really influence the rest of the empty hand systems. So I believe that this concept originated from the pole before it got to the empty hands, and which is one of the core concept of the Wing Chun. So again, variations is due to variation in technique. The important thing is focus on the concepts. Again, this is the main focus of this Lok Din Bun Guan series. For example, Till, Biu. So you might say, well, those are 3 techniques, but actually they express the first point. Okay, if I use Biu, okay, as a spear or smack your feet, okay, or break your jawbone, I'm using the tip of the pole as the main form of attack. That's the first point. So, but it could be expressed in the forms of 3 techniques. Biu, Dang, Till. Okay? Now if I have a motion that goes down with the tip, that becomes Dim. Now if I have a motion that goes down, but using the body of the guan, that becomes the second point. That's the downward energy using the body to express the techniques. So sometimes we call this point Sa. Okay? So you might say, well, I see this as more like a lan. Well, lan is the next point where it expresses occupy and fence off the space. So in concept, it's different from where you're coming down to destroy your opponent's limbs or weapons. So again, the movement might be the same, or you might call it different technique, but the concept are very different. So again, lan, I could have a lan where I brace off with this end of the pole to fence off to occupy space, or I could be lan with using the first half of the pole. I could be lan down, I could be lan going up, I could be lan going down, because lan expresses occupied space. As long as I occupy my areas, that's more of what we call lan concept. So that's 3 points right there. Okay, the next point is tight. So if you have a downward motion, you can attack, have upward motion. So if I hit with the body of the pole going up, that's tight. So not necessarily that's where you're using the tip. So again, okay, the movement might look similar, but the concept is different. So here you have 4 right now. You have the point, the very ending of the pole. Then you have the body to destroy going down, destroy going up, and then to brace, fence off, to occupy space using the whole pole. So that's the 4 point. The 5th point, where you are talking about incoming energy, where you direct, okay, you sweep, okay, redirect. So Tan, Fuk, Song Guan, Bong Guan, all those techniques are redirect. We call that keep, or continue to parry, okay? So they're actually the same point, but different techniques. So that's the 5th point. Then last, you have the 6th point, where you're dealing with a lot of motions, where you're going back and forth. For example, if I go, Fuk, this is actually running, okay? Somebody chopped my stick down, I run on top and hit his hands. So actually it looks like a Fuk technique, but actually that's called Zhao Guan. So it's called running pole, that's the 6th concept. So when you string all the 6 together, that connection, that is called a half point. Because if you put 6 of those concepts together, that's only half of the picture. The other half is the connection. So we call that 6.5. So again, I hope that this gave you guys a new insight into the Lok Din Bun Guan. Again, Kung Fu, Wing Chun, or any type of martial art, we get our guidance from the experienced teachers and masters, but one of the most important teachers is our own experience and then our own understanding. So don't forget that we have to gain the experience, understand the concepts, and be humble enough to have an open mind to receive teaching from someone with more experience. Thank you very much for watching this Lok Din Bu Guan series. This is number 9. Hopefully you have gained a new insight, and with your guidance from your own Sifu as well as your own practice, I wish you the best of luck in this Lok Din Bu Guan series. The next series, which is 10, I intend to do the Ba Zam Do. And then after that, future series would be strictly on Wing Chun fighting applications, which includes the open hands as well as the weapons, the two-man weapon sets, as well as Qi Guan and all type of applications. So again, thank you and have a best of luck in training.